Thanks for coming today. My name is Jeff Shaner, and I'm the product manager for Collector for ArcGIS, as well as a number of our other mobile applications. And with me is Doug Morgenthaler. He's our product owner for Collector and longtime Esri employee, and works with a lot of the other mobile teams as well. Before we start, I'd like to ask for those of you in the audience, who here is currently using Collector for ArcGIS? A few of you. This is an introduction class. Why are you here? You could be out at the beach right now. All right. Well, for those of you that haven't used Collector, I want to talk about a couple of the fundamentals first. Collector for ArcGIS is an app that's included within the ArcGIS platform. It runs on iOS devices like your iPhones and iPads. It runs on Android phones and tablets. And we've added support for Windows 10 tablets as well. And the Collector application really is centered upon a core founding principle of the platform, and that's the web map. The web map brings the Collector user experience to life. It defines the data dictionary and what you collect in the field. It determines who has access to the maps and the work that can be done within them. And it's really that foundation that you use within the platform to kind of generate the field workflows that need to be accomplished inside of your organization. It supports offline map use, so you can interactively download maps within the Collector application for use when you have no connectivity in the field. And a fairly recent addition, we added support for high accuracy GPS. So you can take an iPhone, which by default will only give you 5 meters worth of accuracy through the location service API, pair it with an external GNSS receiver, and get down to a centimeter level of accuracy with it, both in the horizontal and the vertical. That's if you have the right receiver and the right real-time correction source. For those of you that, either have Collector today and have been using it or are looking at using Collector, how important is the high accuracy capability? Quite a few of you. Okay. It's good to know. So how is Collector being used today? Well, Collector, when we started to build it, we thought about the top left use case that you see here. Really being able to collect new information, kind of fill up the coffers of your GIS database, really, and update that existing information you might have to make sure that it's accurate and it's the most current data that you can manage inside of your GIS. And with additions like the high accuracy capabilities, now you can do mapping of assets that require that level of assurance that the position is, sub-foot, if you'd like. And that quite often is important for those that are in public works and utilities where assets that you manage may not be visible. They could be underground, like a water pipeline or a gas pipeline. Second picture there, and use is kind of capturing, I'd call it really unstructured data. It's observations that need to be made. In this instance, it's actually on the border between Canada and Mexico. No, I'm just kidding. Between the US and Mexico at the Rio Grande, where Border Patrol is looking at drug trafficking, looking at places where the Rio Grande is the boundary between the two, and you can see trampling of grass that indicates an observation that there may be some clue toward drug trafficking occurring. So they capture the location from the GPS, they capture photos like you see there, and all those observations go back into the layer in which is part of the map, right? Third use case, which is kind of similar, we see a lot of adoption, we saw a lot of it early on, is in the event management kind of scenario. Being able to quickly put together maps that let you capture information like observations or assessments of damage in near real time and feed that back in to help make more informed decisions when an emergency event is happening. So 3 different types of use cases that I wanted to mention. 2 of them are actually fairly similar, but those are just a few of the things that we see customers doing with Collector. I'm going to talk about a few more too. So really completing that asset inventory, improving the accuracy and the currency of your data, modernizing field workflows. Any of you out there supporting or wanting to support a mobile workforce that is doing all their work on paper right now? A number of you, right? And the biggest thing about going after an application like Collector and replacing that is all the efficiency gains. I talked to an organization yesterday where they use a work management system in their office. They print out paper that gives each mobile worker their field assignment. And then at the end of the day, they actually have to come in and line up in a queue to hand in their paper reports. And that process takes over an hour. They stand in line for over an hour. So that's an hour of their day that they've lost because they have to do everything on paper. The one on the bottom right, that's one of my favorite users that started with the early beta of the high accuracy capabilities. His name is Travis Anderson. And I'm going to talk about him a little bit later, but he's using Collector on an iPad mini doing high accuracy data collection. The one in the middle, and he's doing it for hydrants. So we've seen a lot of uptake in the water utility space of this high accuracy capability. It's a no-brainer, right? Because you managing all of those assets, a lot of them underground, they require an ensured accuracy. It just makes sense. Another one that's kind of popped up as a common pattern recently is UAV flight control. So being able to go out with Collector and capture the ground control points and then actually fly your drone missions, process the imagery using those control points directly from your hosted feature service, and now you have these highly accurate imagery products really quickly. So we actually put a new template, which Doug will show you some of the template work, put a new template into the last release of ArcGIS Online so you can stand up one of those web maps really quickly using that template to capture all that data. The other types of use cases I wanted to mention, it really kind of revolve around asset maintenance. So one of the things that you can do pretty effectively with Collector, because Collector is founded upon your investment in the geodatabase and the information model that we provide in the platform, you can leverage the relational model to manage the inspection workflow. So in that hydrant use case, say I had to do inspections off a hydrant. And I also potentially wanted to mark violations off of the inspections. Well, I could model that inside of the geodatabase as a one-to-many relationship between hydrants and inspections, and a one-to-many relationship table to table from inspections to violations, all the way through having photo attachments as one-to-manys as well. All of that is fully supported inside Collector, so you can capture that inspection data, those violations, bring that all back, and maintain your infrastructure that way. 2 other kind of use cases that I wanted to quickly mention. The one on the left, because I think it's just really darn cool. Has anyone here heard of Reedy Creek Improvement District? Wow, someone here. Sorry. They're a water district that has one customer. One customer. But that customer is Disney World. Nice customer to have, right? Wonder what the billing cycle looks like for them. But Reedy Creek does all of their work using Collector. And one of the interesting types of work they do is aquatic surveys. We've seen a number of users kind of heading down that realm. So not only is it doing asset maintenance, they're actually using Collector on boats. Another is mosquito control. So our solutions team, if you haven't talked with our solutions team, build a set of ready-to-use templates that you can leverage inside of your organization. And they've got some really cool tools like the solution deployment tool that you stand up these templates very quickly. And there's one that's centered around mosquito control or mosquito abatement. And they're leveraging, there's a number of organizations in Florida that are leveraging a collector along with Workforce for ArcGIS, pairing those applications together to go out and lay traps, to go out and do sprayings. Another case where collector's being used, but in coordination with other applications. And one that I don't think I have a slide on, but related to that, is using Operations Dashboard with it. So one of the pieces of feedback we heard from a customer recently was they were deploying mobile out to a field crew. The field crew was like, nah, I kind of like my paper. I don't really want to go with these mobile devices. But they had them in the office to do some training, and they showed them a dashboard where on the dashboard, when they did their form and filled out the location and all that on the map, it just appeared in the dashboard, and they went, I get it. This is cool. I don't have to do paper anymore. So think about those pairings and think about how you can bring those workflows to life, because some of the other applications like Workforce or Dashboard might help you with your work using Collector. So back to that one person again, Travis Anderson. There isn't anybody here from Leax Water District, is there? Is there anyone that knows Travis Anderson? Well, it is a rural water district in Ohio, and we've been trying to make him a little local celebrity in the water community, so I'm hoping one of these days the hand will go up on that. But one of the things that Travis said to us was, you know, he's a civil engineer, he doesn't use our platform every day. That was a shocker to us. We thought everybody uses our stuff all the time, right? But he said Collector was easy for him to pick up, and he knows the science of GPS and what to do with it. And he didn't know that Collector could work with high accuracy receivers, so he wanted to give it a try. So what he's got there set up on his range pole, I mentioned already, is the iPad mini running Collector. That's an EOS Aero GNSS receiver with the antenna on top of the pole, and he's connected to the Ohio State DOT network. So all the positions that are coming in to the iPad through the EOS receiver are accurate to a centimeter in the horizontal and vertical. That's the most accurate fire hydrant you're ever going to see, right? Now, maybe not fire hydrants would be the most important for centimeter level accuracy, but the pipes underneath might be. And Travis was able to set that up really easily, and that can be working directly with the RTK network in a connected environment, if you're familiar with RTK, because it requires those corrections come over IP, so over cellular, or we have a number of vendors that provide a satellite-based correction service. And one of them that's been unveiling a new product here this week is Trimble. And they have a new product called Trimble Catalyst. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But how many people here use Trimble receivers? The Trimble Catalyst product's an interesting one because it's a completely new business model for them. And we'll talk about it when we get to the road ahead. It's way at the end of the presentation, so I'm just going to leave you hanging there. But we wanted to, instead of me just talking all the time, show you some demonstrations. So Doug, take it away.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So we're going to go through the process of what a typical GIS administrator might need to do to get started with Collector. So really there's two parts to the process. One is getting a map and layers ready for people to use in data collection, then getting that map out to your field workforce for them to actually do the work. So right now I'm in ArcGIS Online. The same flow works just as well if you're using ArcGIS Enterprise with Portal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new feature layer. And this feature layer is going to be the container for me to store the features that my field workforce is going to be collecting. Now there's a pretty wide variety of industries that we have in here. We work very closely with our solutions teams, like Jeff mentioned, to develop these using industry best practices. So these are really meant for general use, for you to be able to easily and quickly deploy these. Now, one I'll mention here is debris reports or damage assessment. Earlier this year, on a public holiday, in Texas, there was a tornado that had hit a rural community, and the emergency manager, of course, is on holiday, and he knew that he needed to get out and figure out what had happened and where he needed to direct his resources. So while he's driving to the town that was hit by the tornado, he was able to get a web map spun up using one of these templates, deploy it out, and share it to Collector, and take that map, do his data collection, all within 2 hours. That's pretty impressive when you think about, when time is of the essence. So we'll walk through how we go ahead and do this. So I'm going to select a template here. I'm going to pick this nice furry dog here, the hazards template. And these new feature layers, they could have many layers depending on what the requirements are. They can be point, line, polygon. Collector works with all three. This one only happens to have a single layer within it. And this is just a point layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And then I can define an area that I'd be working. I'm just going to leave it for the US for the moment. And then I'm going to give this a name. Of course, I can add any tags, etc. And then I'll finish that off. So what this is doing is it's going off and it's spinning up a new feature layer and underneath that a new feature service in my ArcGIS Online organization for me to use. Hopefully the internet's a little faster than it's been this week for you guys. But once this is done, I now have that container for me to store my data into. What I need to do now is I need to get that in a web map. So as Jeff mentioned, Collector is built around the use of a web map. So I'm going to just add that to a map in the map viewer. And hopefully I didn't really want to add it to an existing map. So I'm going to add it to a new map here. Okay, so if you look over here in my contents, you see I now have my session hazard feature layer that I just created. So now I've got that in my map. I can add additional layers. So in this case, I'm going to search for some other feature layers in my organization. We're going to go ahead and add that to our map. And so now you see I've got 3 more layers in my map. So what, of course, we're authoring a web map. We can do anything we need to do to make that web map useful in the field. So we can set the base map. So maybe we'll use a streets base map. We can set the initial extent. We can set bookmarks. We can configure the pop-ups. But once I've done all that, I can then save that map. Give it a name here. Give it a tag. And save that. So now I've gone through the process of creating the layer, which is the container for the features that I need to collect. I've now added that to my web map. I've added some additional layers that I might want to use within Collector. And now I need to get this out to my field workforce. So I'm just going to go ahead and share this. Now, in order to get this map, I need to share it with my field workforce via a group. So ArcGIS, Collector for ArcGIS uses the same sharing model that you guys are using for other types of web maps, web applications, etc. So I'm just going to share this with a group. And it's going to tell me that I have some sharing permissions that I need to update for the layers in my map. I'm going to update those. And I'm ready to go. So I'm going to quickly switch over here to Collector running on an iPad mini. Okay, so you can see I've now got my session hazard map here in the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and open that map. Okay, who's streaming the cat videos? All right, so you can see, well, my location's not very good at the moment. We're someplace a lot nicer than here. Coronado is gorgeous.
That's a great location to be. What are you talking about?
So as the data starts coming in here, I have on the right-hand side here, I've got my tools, of course, up at the top that I can use. I also have a list of feature types. These are the feature types that were defined in those layers. So you see I have a number of different notes, and then I also have down here my hazards. So those are the feature types that were already pre-configured for me to use when I created that layer from that template. So I'm going to collect, and I've noticed a violent person here.
It's the guy in the red shirt down there streaming cat videos.
And of course, we should be using our GPS, but obviously we're indoors. That's never great. And we'll say presenter next to me. So we'll just enter a description there. Any special instructions? Please contact dispatch. Definitely a priority. So again, we're using pick lists here, very high priority. And of course, for documentation purposes, I need to take a photo. And now that I've saved that, I'm going to set my location manually here because right now I'm not getting a GPS signal that's good enough to meet my required accuracy. And then I'm going to go ahead and submit that. So what we've just done is gone in and created that layer, added it to a web map, shared that web map with our workforce. Workforce opens that map in Collector, performs that collection, and now because I'm working connected, that feature that I just created is immediately available for other people in the organization, in the office, to get me some help. So that's the basic workflow for doing data collection. Now there's one other thing I did want to mention. We did add that other layer in the map, and that had points, lines, and polygons. So while I collected a point there for my violent person report, you can certainly collect lines and polygons as well. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. One is you can simply walk between locations and tap on the GPS location button here on the toolbar, and then just sort of add each vertex independently. Or, for example, if I'm walking a trail, some sort of sidewalk, an irregular feature, I can use what we call streaming. So streaming basically allows me to just walk, and it records positions, even in the background. I don't actually even have to be looking at the device. And I can walk that particular feature, and when I'm done, I've got my geometry ready to go. So that's a couple of ways that you can collect more than just points with Collector.
Cool. Just don't walk into the ocean, okay? So I wanted to recap a little bit about some of the concepts behind what Doug just showed you. Like we've been talking about already, Collector is using those web maps. And Doug was adding feature layers. And feature layers are contained within feature services. Feature services can live hosted in your ArcGIS Online organization or hosted inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, or they can be published by reference from your GIS server as well. There's a lot of considerations on when to use which process, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There is another type of hosted layer that you can add to your map called a location tracking layer. And if you add location tracking, then as you're collecting data, but when the app is in the foreground, you can collect a breadcrumb trail of where you've been. So the location tracking template can do that. Now you could also use Workforce along with Collector and use it as your source of location tracking. That application can just sit and run in the background. And as we move forward, we're going to do more work on centralizing that location tracking capability within the Workforce product. So you can use the location tracking in Collector now if you'd like, but know that in the future, and we'll talk a little bit about the future in a bit, that Workforce will really be the app for that. There's the concept of the feature layers, and then there's also the concept of the base map. Esri has a set of hosted base maps that are living in an Amazon infrastructure that support what's called export tiles off of a tiled map service. And that is what you can use to kind of download the base map within Collector. Now we've limited the number of tiles within that base map, and it's also the default setting in your GIS server to 100,000 tiles. That roughly equates to about 2 gigabytes in size. So you need to think about the scales at which you want to take offline and the area, because 2 gigabytes eats up pretty quickly when you're publishing those PNG images. Now you can also sideload base maps within Collector. So I could take an application like ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap and cook a base map if I have my own content to do that with. And then I can sideload it onto my mobile device. On Android, that can be to an SD card. On iOS, I would have to physically connect my iPhone and drop that tile package that you create into iTunes Connect, into the documents area. And we have a blog article from a few years ago that explains that process. The application settings within the web map can actually determine the functionality within Collector. I mean beyond the actual layer. Like you saw from what Doug created, he had the hazards layer, and that kind of made Collector feel like a hazards collection app, right? But in addition to that, in the web map settings, in the items details, you can turn on and off tools. One of those that I found some people, even within Esri the other day, surprisingly didn't know about, was that you can enable feature search. So I could say I want to search against a layer by a field, and I can set that up in that item details, and that'll work when you're disconnected as well. So if I want to search based upon some asset's ID, I can set that up in the item details, and now I've got searching against my features directly inside a Collector. And like everything else within ArcGIS Online, or the portal within ArcGIS Enterprise, the way that your field workforce accesses the maps within Collector when they sign in is that they are a member of a group. So the maps that you create, like Doug created the hazards map, you share that into a group, your users sign into that group, and then they can access those maps. Now when it comes to the feature layers, there's a number of interesting things to talk about. We already mentioned that they can be hosted inside of ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. There's the hosted data store. But they can also be on premises. And when they're on premises, one of the things you need to think about there is that, first of all, they need to be referencing data that's stored in an enterprise geodatabase. And then if you want to take them offline, the feature classes within those layers, the feature classes within the map that you create, need to have a global ID field associated with them. For offline map use, you need to enable archiving. So non-version archiving can be in the transaction model, or the transaction model could be versioning. And one reason why you'd want to go with a versioning approach would be in the asset maintenance workflows, where potentially we're doing a lot of edits to existing features, right? You want to make sure that you have version control over those edits before they're merged back in to your production instance. So that's an example of where you'd want to use a versioning approach. And the feature service itself has its own mechanisms for managing and isolating versions. So if you look at our server documentation, you'll find a lot of information about offline use of feature services. The feature service itself has an interesting new concept that got introduced called feature service views. So that's also something that I recommend you look at, because a feature service view lets you control things like editing permissions at kind of another level, right? A feature service has editing control associated with it already. You could say, for everyone who uses that feature service, I only want them to add new features, or I never want them to be able to update the location of a feature, only the feature's attributes. And they can never delete features. Those are all editing properties I can set at the feature service level. But now I could also create a feature service view, and at that feature service view level, also change those editing capabilities. So it gives you much more flexibility. So for example, maybe you wanted to have a feature service that everyone edits into, and you need to give it that editing permissions, but then I have a public-facing map so that everyone can see the results of what people have collected, and create a view for that, share it publicly, and not worry about others being able to edit it, because I can shut off all the editing capabilities. Something to think about. As you dive a level deeper, the thing that's important to understand is that through the feature layer, and ultimately your feature class, if you're creating data not from these templates, but from ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap, is that the intelligence you put into the data model just bubbles right up into Collector. So spend some time on the field aliases, look at your fields, attach coded value domains to them, because those coded value domains and those field aliases appear in the Collector user experience. The coded value domain turns into a pick list, right? So those all go into defining that forms experience within Collector. And you can override that at the web map layer for some things. Within the feature templates, you can override them. Within the pop-ups, you can change the visibility of fields and whether certain fields are editable or not. And also you can further override aliases up at that pop-up level. So you might want to think about actually even having a special map just for Collector. So Doug already showed you this. There are over 60 templates within ArcGIS Online that can jumpstart your development with Collector. They're all from different industries. We've added a few of our own, but they're a great way to get started. And the solutions team also maintains a solution gallery on their own website. And that's what this is linked to. When you get the slides from us, you'll be able to access that, or you could just Google solutions.arcgis.com and get to the same site. And there you'll see a whole bunch of templates, not just for Collector, but also for apps like the Operations Dashboard, for Survey 123, for the other apps, the web apps that we have as well. So with that, I wanted to pass it back to Doug so he can show you another demo that more focuses on the offline and relationship models within Collector.
So just to follow up on what Jeff mentioned there before about the solutions team and maintaining these solutions. The solutions team also has an add-in available for ArcGIS Pro. If you want to publish these services from within ArcGIS Pro, you can easily do that as well. And in this case, it's certainly not limited to ones that are appropriate for Collector. There are for templates as well for Operations Dashboard, Web App Builder, etc. So I've added this solution add-in here, and you'll see here on the right-hand side of my toolbar, or my ribbon. And if I tap on this, basically it uses tasks. So I can sign into an organization, and then I can also deploy an ArcGIS solution. So this solution gives me an opportunity to find a series of, so I can find that same hazard. We're running out of real estate here. So under the electric, you see I have hazard collection. So that's that same template. Now there's a couple of additional things that using ArcGIS Pro gets you. One, when we publish those layers through ArcGIS Online or your portal instance, we deploy those in Web Mercator coordinate system. If you want to use a local coordinate system, you can do so in this tool. So that is another set of capabilities that you have available to you. And we didn't talk about this. This tool actually does more than just create the feature layer. It actually creates that feature layer, it adds it to the web map. So all you have to do at that point is share it out with your organization. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about working offline. So most of you, many of you, certainly don't always have the luxury of working in connected areas. You may be, occasionally disconnected. You may be fully disconnected. Collector supports both of those workflows in addition to the normal connected workflow that we took a look at earlier. So here we've still got Collector up and running, and I've got a map here that I have made available for offline use. So that means two things. That means all of the layers in my web map must support the sync capability. And the web map must also be enabled for offline use. So those are the two criteria. So once I do that, you'll see here I've got the San Diego hydrants inspections, and I've got this little cloud with a down arrow. So I'm just going to tap that arrow, and in this case I'm presented with a choice. I can either use a base map that's pre-existing on my device and that I might have previously downloaded or side-loaded using iTunes, as Jeff mentioned earlier. These are just tile packages. So you can create a tile package in ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap, and side-load that to your device and use that as a base map. Or I can download a new one. Because the Wi-Fi is pretty terrible, we're going to use the one that's already on my device, and we're just going to download the features in this web map. And of course, I'm using a secured service, which gives me an opportunity to mention
your password.
It's a very secret password.
Hello Kitty.
It might be the exact same thing as the username.
Ooh.
Bad security practices. But this particular web map isn't using layers from ArcGIS Online. This is using feature layers from my ArcGIS server, an ArcGIS Enterprise. So you can still use ArcGIS Online with that web map and reference layers that might be even behind your firewall and make use of them within Collector. Okay, so I'm just going to look here for some data, which I don't see at the moment. There we go. So I've got some hydrants that I've already collected. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm defining the work area. And really the work area means it's going to clip I don't want to download everything. I might have thousands and tens of thousands of features in my feature layer. I don't need to take all of those offline. So I just need to define the extent here of the features the area I'm going to be working. So I'm going to hit download, and we'll pray the Wi-Fi holds up for us. Actually, I'm running LT, so that should be a little bit faster. Now, what it's doing is it's going and it's it's taking that extent, it's creating a replica, and it's extracting all of the features in that layer. And it could also be extracting, if you happen to have tile layers that you want to have, you may have some extra imagery that you have that you want to use while you're working offline. That data will also be extracted. If you want to use your tile layers offline, they need to support the export tiles capability. So if that's available, then you can take those and have those available offline as well. Okay, so we've now got our map offline, so I'm just going to switch and see that I now have one map that's on my device. So I'm going to go to airplane mode since I will be working offline. And the experience for working in Collector is really generally the same. You'll see that I have this blue square here, that's the extent of the area that I took offline. And then if I continue to go out further, you can see the extent of my base map that I used. So this is the area in which I'm going to be working. Now, there's a couple of other things to note about this map. So this was a San Diego hydrant inspections map. So Jeff talked about asset maintenance. So someone's already gone out and collected all of these assets. I don't need to recollect them. And I certainly don't need someone to update their geometry. So in this case, I do not have any capabilities to update the geometry in these. All I can do is inspect them. So, and inspections are generally modeled with related tables within the geodatabase information model. So you'll see here that I've selected a hydrant. And that hydrant, of course, has things like an identifier and manufacturer and other things that are static. But down at the bottom of my panel here, you'll see that I have a strip that says hydrant inspections. That hydrant inspections, I've got two things I can do here. I can view any existing inspections on this particular hydrant. And you can see that there's been quite a few. And I can look at any of the details of those inspections and edit those inspections, or I can create a new inspection. So that's what we're going to do here. And just like when we were collecting the violent person report, just like when we were trying to collect the line feature, all I'm doing is filling in the attributes. And again, of course, we have things like pick lists. I can certainly type in a PSI for the hydrant. Perhaps maybe there is some maintenance required. It needs to be chained, and it needs to be painted. It's probably in pretty poor shape. And then I can also include any notes as well as set the inspection date here. I'll just set that to today. You can see that's populated. And then typically for when I'm doing asset inspections, I might also want to take a photo. I can, of course, take a photo like we showed earlier, or I can choose one from the library on the camera roll on your phone. Here I've got a pretty super hydrant, if you can see that. And now I'm going to submit that. And what you see is it stored it on the device. So remember, we're working offline. And while I'm working offline, every change I make, every feature I edit, every feature I would add, every feature I would update is just being stored locally on the device. So I may go out for an hour, I may go out for a day, I may go out for 3 days. And meanwhile, all of this information is just being stored as I'm going through my work. But you'll notice when we go back out to the map screen here, I have this red badge that indicates the number of outstanding edits I have stored locally on my device. So you can see it's just a badge with a 1 here. So once I get into the office or Starbucks, depending on your caffeination needs, you can then do what we call as a sync. And so all I'm going to do is tap this cloud button, and that's going to start syncing. Now, by default, sync does 2 things. It takes all the edits that I have locally on my device, sends those back to that feature layer, wherever it may be. In this case, it's hosted on my own ArcGIS server instance. And it takes anything that's been changed or added or removed in that work area that I took offline and downloads that to my device. So I now have the latest current copy. I've synced back with my server. Everybody in the organization sees my edits. I see everyone else's, and I can go back out into the field. So that's just a quick flow about how you can take advantage of not only a connected workflow like we saw earlier, but a disconnected or occasionally connected workflow with Collector, as well as the asset maintenance sort of inspection workflow that you can use for updating existing assets, not just creating new ones.
Cool. Thanks, Doug.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yes.
If you made changes to your data back at home, will the user see a similar little number 1 or 500 or something?
The question there is if the user, if you make changes, the changes happen back in your office, right? You synchronize your changes. Then someone in the office makes a change. Will you see it back in the field, or will someone else see the change from the office in the field, right? That's basically what you're asking?
Will it have that little red, like it showed the red one?
Ah.
Will there be some signal to the user that they need to...
The question, sorry, I missed that. The question there is, will the user have some indication that there's been edits and changes in the office that they haven't gotten yet, really? And the answer is no. We're not constantly polling the service to find out if there are changes that need to be brought down. But I'll explain a little bit about how the synchronization process works in a second or two here. That's good feedback. We've also been looking at, in the future, could we have an automated sync process? You are connected at a set frequency. Maybe we are syncing up or syncing down so that you always have the latest. The working in the offline mode. If you were working in a connected mode, you would just get the edits, right? It would just happen. We'd support the layer refresh on the map, and you'd see the updates come in. So Doug went through this in the demonstration. I won't spend much time on it. You can see the different things that you can do when you're offline, right? All that core functionality is there. The one exception to that would be leveraging the fact that through the search, you could search against the geocoder. We don't take geocoders within ArcGIS Online offline. So you have to rely on that feature search capability, at least for now. Some of the sync settings. So going a little bit further to what we were talking about here, we've had some customers that, they actually just collect data only, right? They don't care about other people's updates. They just are out to collect the things they need to do, and they want to push it up. They never want anything back down. Because getting stuff back down can be pretty costly, right? I mean, especially if there's photos involved. So I might be creating features, adding photos, uploading my edits, and if there's 10 or 15 of us working in that same extent, that same working extent, I got to bring down all of their features and all their photos. That's a lot of payload on a cellular network, potentially, if that's what I'm using when I have connectivity. So we've added some optimizations to help you within Collector to maximize your workflows. One, there's a client-side setting that you can turn on and off where you could push only your updates. So if I don't care about those edits from other people, I can just flick that off and upload only. There's also on the client side the ability to size the photos. So we'll compress the photos for you. If you like to take those big panoramas, they're actually very large. You can apply some compression to those photos. We just added video too, didn't we? Did we add that? We didn't. Well, that didn't get in. Sorry, I didn't say that. Video didn't get in. Video. Right. So in addition to that, on the web map, there's also some advanced offline options for the configuration. So for example, maybe I only want to get the schema down because I've got new people out there that are collecting. They don't need any data. They just need the schema to collect data. That's an option. Maybe I want to just get the features down and not any attachments. That's a common use case for the emergency management folks that do damage assessments, right? I'm going off doing maybe I want to see the windshield surveys that were done. with the photo, without the photos. I don't really care about the photos, but I need to know that each of these properties had been assessed. I want to see that feature. I could do that without having to get the photos. So there's a number of options available to you that you may not be aware of that are in the web map settings as well. So on the overall workflow, I wanted to just kind of diagram out the two different ways that this works. One is that hosted deployment like we've been showing you, where either you're using ArcGIS Pro and you're publishing feature services that are hosted in ArcGIS Online, and that actually is taking the data as well as that schema and moving all of its content into a hosted layer, where now that ArcGIS Online organization is your GIS server. All that content's living up there. And then you're working with Collector. You're downloading the maps, you're making your edits locally, and you're synchronizing changes. The thing to think about there is all that information's being managed in the cloud. If you want to bring it back into your production database, you need to get it back out. Right now, you need to export that data out. You can export it out to a file geodatabase that'll bring all the photos and everything along with it. Moving forward, what we're working towards in the platform, and it started already, but it's not there yet for Collector, is that there's been this process of called portal-to-portal collaboration. And there's a start of ArcGIS Online to portal collaboration, but it's not yet bidirectional, and that's coming. And then now you can actually treat ArcGIS Online as its own replica and have it sync periodically, right? There's a lot of benefits of that kind of workflow, because one of the biggest challenges, and I want to see a show of hands who have encountered this, have struggled with how do I get access from my mobile device behind my firewall. Anyone struggled with that? Quite a few people. If you're not working with sensitive data and you can use hosted services, you don't have that problem anymore. And then within your organization, you're just replicating back and forth between that hosted data store. It's a much simpler workflow. I should mention, though, if you're not aware of it, if you have a mobile device management software in your organization, Collector is a good example of an app that supports app-level VPN. So whoever in your organization manages their mobile device management software, they can actually use Collector and configure the VPN capability, so you don't have to sign in with VPN on the device first before using the app. Second type of deployment is really within your enterprise. And say you're using ArcGIS Pro, you're publishing. Here you're using your own GIS server. Now everything's going into that enterprise database. You don't have to export it back out. But your considerations here are on that transaction model. And yes, unfortunately, for those of you that don't like them, which I've encountered a number of people that don't like them, you have to have global IDs on your feature classes. So we wanted to move on to some of the new features and then get to what's coming next, because we've got some really cool things coming next with Collector. From a new feature kind of highlights perspective, over the last, 8 months or so, we've been adding a lot of support for this high accuracy data capture that I mentioned. One of the most important things about that is that Collector had been using just the location service API on your smartphone, right? That means that the position itself might not truly be coming from a GPS source. It could be assisted by other means, whether it be cellular or Wi-Fi. And if you do some testing around that, you can get some really interesting results where potentially you get snapping that happens to a Wi-Fi point, and really kind of obscure results. You need to think about what's the level of accuracy that I want out of my GPS data capture. At best, an iOS device will report back to you that it gets 5 meters accuracy. So just keep that in mind. Now, that'll even say 5 meters if you were to take a centimeter level accurate GNSS receiver and pair it with your iPhone. By default, that's just how it works. And it actually, that pairing will take over the location source in the operating system. Your accuracy, your true accuracy might be a centimeter, but The iPhone will only ever report 5 meters. So what we needed to do is we needed to write our own GPS library, our own location provider. And we did that inside of Collector. And that location provider is something you can set up inside of Collector when you pair to one of these receivers. And then we read the goodness right out of the GPS stream. And we parse that information and we present the true accuracy for you, and we can attach it to the features that you capture as well. So you know the estimated horizontal, vertical accuracy, you know the number of satellites, you know the PDOP, the HDOP, all of that wonderful stuff around the GPS. We also will pop alerts, so if you lose that GPS fix, or that, the GPS fix, or you lose the Bluetooth connection, we'll let you know. The other thing that we've added is GPS averaging. So when talking with the U.S. Forest Service, one of the things they said is you need to add GPS averaging, because if you're standing at a location capturing data and you just capture the first position that comes in, we call that Russian roulette, because you never know really what you're going to get. That thing could be 1,000 meters off. So instead, what we want you to do is take a number of positions over some, say, time interval, and then compute the average. So that's what GPS averaging does. And that's even more important when you're trying to map to the, sub-foot level, because if you have, like Travis Anderson did, the receiver mounted to a pole, and you move that pole just a little bit, you're inducing some error, right? So being able to take and compute an average is really important. And with the averaging, we'll actually store the standard deviation into the data too, so you could look at how precise that averaging measurement was.
Does that toggle on or off?
That is a setting, yes. So maybe when Doug gets to demoing, he can show you where that setting's at. Just put him on the spot there. A couple other things, SD card support for Android, being able to rename the photos that you create. Those are new enhancements that we added in. Something that a lot of people don't know either is that, like in the integration we've shown with other applications like Workforce and Navigator, what we also did was expose this URL scheme. And there's a GitHub repository that shows how you can use it. So you could actually remotely control Collector. It's kind of like typing in http:// except you're actually calling ArcGIS Collector and remotely starting it. And that can be done by an email. It doesn't have to be through code. And you can pass it things like a web map ID and a location. So it opens up a specific map, opens up to a specific location on that map. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Doug so he can demonstrate some of those new capabilities.
All right. Okay, so let's take a quick look at how you can configure Collector to improve your accuracy with an external GNSS receiver. So what I've done to this point is I have a Bat Elf external GNSS receiver. This is not going to get you centimeter level accuracy. This is 1 to 3 meters, but much, much better than your smartphone. So what I've done is I've paired this to my tablet here using Bluetooth. And once I've done that, I just need to do a few things in Collector to get things set up. So I need to do, and before we get to that, here's our setting for GPS averaging. Here down in the bottom left, and you'll notice if I turn that on, I can specify the number of positions that I want to collect before I take that point. So, in many cases, 5 to 10 positions is plenty. You don't need to go too far down the, and go overboard. Okay, so setting up that receiver. So 2 things. You probably want to make sure that your project requirements are reflected in your location accuracy so that you're getting good positions that meet your requirements. Secondly, you need to set a location provider. Basically, the location provider is the source of GPS locations that you want to use within Collector. By default, we have an integrated receiver. That integrated receiver is, in a smartphone and a tablet like this, not very good. But you can go ahead and add an additional receiver. So because I've already paired this to the device, it's looking for receivers that are already paired to this particular tablet. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. And then I can include the antenna height. So obviously this is a handheld unit, but certainly there's many receivers where you're mounting the receiver or the antenna on the range pole. So you could add the 2-meter range pole in here to use that and have that subtracted from your altitude, your elevation values that you would collect. So I'm going to leave it at 0 for this. And then once I've set that, I'm just going to say I want to use that as my location provider. So what that's doing is it's saying, I know there's an integrated receiver, I am not using it. All of my GPS positions comes only from this. So no Wi-Fi, no cellular impact. This is only getting GPS signal. Okay, now the other thing I need to do, depending on the type of receiver I'm using, is I need to set a location profile. By default, every collector assumes, and has always done so, assumes that your positions are coming in on the WGS 84 datum. However, if you are using a correction service, RTK, SBOS, satellite, maybe RTX, OmniStar, those are probably coming in on local coordinate systems. And so you need to tell collector how to do the right datum transformation from the data that's coming in a local coordinate system, perhaps NAD83 2011, and getting that to match your map. So I'm quickly going to set up a coordinate system here. So let's say we are using ITRF 2008 as that's the positions that are coming in from our receiver. And then we need to set up, so that was where the positions are coming from. We need to say where are they going to. This is what the coordinate system is being used by the map. And when you use a web map, the coordinate system of your map is determined by your base map. So if you are using an Esri base map, such as topographic, streets, etc., then you are going to be using Web Mercator. So once I pick Web Mercator, now I've got the from and the to. We have one additional piece of information that we can provide to help us pick the right transformation, and that's the area of interest. So we'll just kind of zoom into the San Diego area here. And when I hit continue, I get a list of appropriate datum transformations to use. If you don't know which transformation to use, take the top one. That is the one that we think is most appropriate, given the 3 bits of information you gave us. So once I pick that, so this case it was just going back, it was ITRF 2008 to NAD83 to WGS 84. So that's the transformation. It also gives you a bit of an hint about what area of extent that's appropriate for. All right, so once I do that, I'll set up a name and add that. And much like I did with my location provider, I just need to switch here within the settings. And now every position that comes in from that receiver is going to be, that datum is going to be applied before it's stored into my feature layer. So this is these are the 3 pieces you need to do to set up for high accuracy data collection. Now, how is this manifested? In collector itself, it's just all the same. All you need to do is do the same collection workflow that you've done with your smartphone before. Now the difference is you should be getting better positions, and you can use this, what we call the GPS badge. So if I tap on the badge down here, you'll see that I get this pop up, and it gives me real-time information about what is coming off of this receiver, how accurate is it, how many satellites do I have, so I can start using this as a diagnostic tool to figure out, hey, maybe if I'm not getting a great signal or great accuracy what is happening. So you can start figuring out what's going on. Now, the other thing is that we have what we call GNSS metadata fields, or GPS metadata fields. And you can add these to your feature layers, your point feature layers, and we will populate these automatically. So this is some of the data that we've collected around the Redlands, and you can see that we have, it lists the receiver name, the horizontal accuracy, so 13 centimeters in this case, in the horizontal, 21 in the vertical, along with the type of fix that I had. So in this case, I had RTK float, how old were my corrections, 3 seconds, fixed time, et cetera. So I can get a pedigree of knowing how accurate was that point that I collected using my receiver. Now, some of these fields will get populated even if you use your smartphone. So even if you're not using one of these, you can still get some of this information, but not everything, because the core location API doesn't provide that. So that's a quick look into how you can start using external GNSS receivers with Collector.
Thank you again, Doug. So moving on to what's next with Collector. Earlier I said we were talking about Trimble Catalyst. So Catalyst is on our roadmap. It's the next thing we're working on. And we've been working closely with Trimble on this already. They've been showing it down on the exhibit floor. And the interesting thing that I wanted to say about Catalyst is that it's a completely different business model for Trimble here. So that what you're looking at in the picture is the Catalyst antenna that's at the top of that range pole. That antenna has a cable that's coming to a consumer-grade Android phone. That antenna, hopefully I don't get in trouble with this, I think it's under $500. I don't know the exact price.
$350.
Doug Morgenthaler, for the record, said $350. Now, you can buy that antenna for $350, but in addition to that, you purchase a subscription with Trimble. And it's a pay-as-you-go kind of subscription. So if you do seasonal work, that's a great model to have, because you can just suspend your service with them through the winter months. And you pay per the accuracy that you're also looking for. So if you want even more accuracy, like you want to get down towards the sub-foot level, you can pay more for that. So we're working on support for it. Catalyst was just released, I believe, late last week. And we'll have an update to Collector early in Q3 that supports it. We're adding a couple of other things, some bug fixes and stuff like that. One of the things that, again, the Forest Service asked us for is to be able to report the confidence in the accuracy of a GPS position using an algorithm that is roughly equivalent to 95% confidence. Today it's a 68% confidence, which is kind of more of an industry standard. But their standard, which is a federal government standard, is 95%, if I've got that right. And then we're looking at doing some work with coordinate unit display as well. What we really wanted to do is talk to you about the new big thing with Collector. So we're building the next generation of Collector right now on the latest ArcGIS runtime architecture. And it's going to bring with it a whole bunch of new goodies. One of those things is better maps. So a lot of people have asked us, why can't you label in Collector? And our underlying runtime doesn't support it. So when you label on a web map, we want to be able to support those labels in Collector. The new runtime supports it. We'll get that kind of stuff for free, as we'll get vector base maps. And you'll be able to take vector base maps offline within Collector. And there's a lot of advanced symbology. One of the things Doug's going to show you is the symbology around this specific screenshot, which is using a template in the wildfire community called FIMIT. Does anyone know what FIMIT is? Wow, we've actually got a few of you here. All right. So one of the things you've probably noticed with FIMIT is that it uses a lot of marker line symbols. Directionality on the line symbols is really important. And that's just not supported today in Collector. Well, we're getting that support as we move forward. For high accuracy today, again, we're getting this out of the runtime. It doesn't support editing of z-values. So we're going to be able to support that along with being able to do vertical datum transformations as well. And we're building a new user experience. You can see that Collector looks different. The plus button's down at the bottom right, and there's a bunch of other new enhancements. You kind of will see through the demonstration more of this, but you'll be able to slide up and have a full form-centric approach, or slide down and have a map-centric approach, or go somewhere in between. So it really gives you more flexibility when working either against the form or against the map. And the map-centric approach has more of a cursor-on-target type of experience than what we have today. In the offline work, we'll actually have a process called pre-planned workflows. So if you have a distributed workforce and you want to provide them with the experience up front for taking a map offline, what you can do is you can essentially, like you do dynamically within Collector today, do that inside of ArcGIS Online, pre-package it, give it a name, so that when it comes to downloading the map in Collector, they can just pick an area or a region. It'll download that, and they don't have to go through the little wizard to take a map offline on their own. And then we're working on smarter forms. Has anyone here heard about Arcade? Other than, the video games, but yes. So Arcade's a new language, expression language in the platform. It started with labeling and rendering, and it's moving its way through to forms next. And we really need an expression language across that whole platform, right? You want smart forms in Pro, you want smart forms in your web applications, and you want them in Collector too. So Arcade's going to bring that to our experience. And we're working with the Pro team to bring that to life. Also, we're looking at other types of input, like barcodes and QR codes. And then some of the logic that you see today in applications like Survey 123, the conditional logic, being able to group attributes together into logical groups and collapse and expand them when you got really large forms. And then really simplifying the deployment process, putting more on the map so that there's less that the field worker has to do. But with that, I've talking too much about it. We'll give it back over to Doug so he can show you.
Okay, so here I'm on an iPhone here, and I'm just going to take you guys through a quick tour, give you a glimpse of some of the capabilities that we now have and are working on for this next generation of Collector. So in general, we've really focused a lot of energy on improving the user experience. Collector's been out there for about 4.5 years, and you guys have given us a lot of feedback on what you like and what you don't. So we've taken that to heart, and we've really tried to make the workflows simpler for your field workforce, and hopefully that means simpler for you. Okay, so as Jeff mentioned, we've really tried to promote the use of the Collect tool here in the bottom. So I'm going to, well, I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to zoom into my current location here. And you can see that we've been in this room before. I can just simply tap on that, and we've changed the experience for setting your location. Obviously, with Collector, you're typically using your GPS. We've now gone to this cursor on target approach, and you'll see that I don't have this form. I can see both my map and my list of feature types all at once here. So if I want to see that full list, I can just slide this up. We're just going to do a bike repair shop here. And we've really tried to optimize the experience here so I can quickly add that point at my GPS location. But if for some reason I wanted to move that location over and set that manually, all I need to do is slide the map here under the reticle, which is a whole lot better than my fingers trying to tap precisely on this map. The other thing this gets us is we've heard from you guys a lot of, hey, somebody accidentally tapped on the map after they set the GPS location. They didn't realize it, so I've got a point that's, a couple hundred yards off, and now they've got to go back out in the field and recollect that. I can tap on this map all day long. I'm not going to be able to inadvertently update my location. We have to use the update point button. Similarly, we've tried to improve how you add a photo. Most people take a photo. At least that's what you guys have told us, rather than grabbing one from the camera roll, which we would ask you every time you did it. So again, using the camera, very simple, but just little optimizations there. And then again, as I'm filling out the attributes, when I want to see all of the form, I can just slide that up and use all the real estate that I need, and then if not, I can slide it back down. Okay, so one more thing. I know we're a little over time here, but there was one other thing I wanted to show you guys. And that's some of the map improvements that Jeff was mentioning. So here we've got a wildfire map, again, using that FIMIT symbology. And you can see here that I've got a few things. If I zoom out, I can switch base maps. Maybe we'll go to a navigation base map here. Wherever it is. There we go. And I can make sure that's the base map I want before I even get rid of the tool. But as I rotate the map, you'll see that a few things are happening. I've got labels. Those labels are on a vector base map. They're crisp, they're fast, they're slick. They're way better than what you would have seen in the tiled base maps that we use today. Also, those labels are rotating as I rotate my map, so I can always read them. I don't have to tilt my head to the side and try and figure out what that's actually saying. In addition, I'm also labeling my features. So here I've got a division break, and that has a label. I know exactly what division that is. I don't have to tap on it to figure that out. So again, lots of improvements to the map. And again, kind of just looking at that experience for, being able to use the rich symbology that means a lot to folks that work in industries or in domains like this. If we wanted to do a complete or helitanker water drop, again, we can just go through, quickly add that. Just by sliding on the map. Of course, I could do this by using my GPS. Submit that, and you see I get that symbology that is the symbology that a person working a fire is going to know. They're not going to know what, a simplified line. So again, just a handful of improvements that we wanted to highlight. Jeff will probably talk about it here in a second, but we've made a lot of changes to try and improve this, both on the technology side and on the user experience side. We want to hear from you about what we've got right and where we still need to do work. So back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, and that's really my last slide, is the schedule around this. So really important to us is getting your feedback, as Doug mentioned. We're planning to have our first beta on this collect workflow pretty soon, early in Q3. And like Collector progressed over the few years it's been out, we have similar drops that are coming. We've got dependencies with our underlying runtime team to get new features in, like actually the ad hoc offline, the related tables isn't there, the high accuracy stuff's not there. So that'll lead us right up to Q2. The other thing I wanted to mention about it, though, that's really important is we're not just going to have this new experience overwrite your current collector, because we don't want to get chased down with pitchforks, right? You've got a workforce out there that you're supporting right now. So we'll actually, here's our current plan, and we might talk about it a little bit clearer later this year, but I'm going to give you my best shot. What we're going to do is put a new entry into the app stores. We're going to call that new entry collector. And for the first while, we'll have a beta program that is in the stores and controlled through the beta programs by the stores. And it'll be collector, but it can live side by side with your existing collector app that you have out in the field today. When we go to release, we're going to still have those two side by side. We'll probably take the existing one that's there today and rename it. Right now, the name that's bouncing around is Collector Classic. I don't know, maybe we can come to something better than that. I don't know. But the new one will be called Collector. So for those downloading it for the first time ever, they'll download the new Collector app. And that gives you time to migrate over workflows and support the staff that you have that are using Collector in production today, because we don't want to disrupt that flow for you. And then over time, what we'll do is we'll just take that app out of the store. It'll continue to run on your device if you've installed it, but you wouldn't be able to grab a new version or grab a version of it out of the store. So that's a way to kind of gracefully deprecate an app like the collector that's out there now. And that's the approach that we're going to take. So with that, we've completely run out of time. We do have a survey. We're hoping that we can score some all fives on that survey. If you don't like what we said today, my name is Ishmael Shavite, and this is Chris Lesweir. So with that, question?
Yeah, real quick. If you had an external camera that you wanted maybe more zoom capability with your phone, is there a way to easily connect that picture in the Collector app?
Yeah, the question is, if you had an external camera, could you leverage that external camera with Collector? The way that you would need to do that is you'd have to get a camera that supports its own Bluetooth connection to the your device. And then, like Doug was showing you, you can either take a picture directly by invoking the camera, or you can go to your photo library and then attach it, right? So it's going to be a little more complicated workflow for your field team to do that, but you'd be able to support that, yes. Yeah.
So when you showed it pairing with your little GNS receiver there, how does it know, I assume that's being all done by Bluetooth, how does it know what receivers are available? Like if I have a Trimble Geo 7X, if I enable Bluetooth on that, will it just magically find it?
The question there is, what receivers can you actually pair to? Really, that's what it is. And it depends on the operating system of the device, actually. If it's an Apple receiver, the vendor, like Trimble, has to take their receiver through Apple's MFI program that certifies the hardware for use as a location provider. And that determines a contract between the receiver and the operating system. And what we do is we work with those vendors and we get what's called a protocol. And we work with that protocol and they whitelist Collector in their program with Apple. So it's a fairly complex environment that they need to work through, and we need to have them whitelist. And we list the vendors that we support in our documentation website, so you'll know exactly who we support.
So
Trimble is absolutely one of those with the R1 and R2 receivers, and the Catalyst is an Android-only thing that they've done, right?
So
Go ahead.
if I can add one piece of information there. So as Jeff mentioned, iOS is quite limited. And on Trimble's side, it's an R1 and an R2. Android and Windows are open as long as the receivers support NEMA output. So if you can configure your receiver to support NEMA output of a set of sentences, which we have in the documentation, then you should be able to use that, assuming it's Bluetooth paired. We do actually on Windows even support serial. So
Yeah.
When you were talking about location services earlier and the ability to track, you briefly mentioned that one of two options, you either have to keep the application and phone on the entire time, and is it recording a track log of some type that's exportable, or?
Yeah, do you want to take that one?
And then the second question that kind of ties into it is then you also were talking about using, I believe, Workforce operations dashboard.
Workforce.
Workforce.
Yeah.
That could be done if the phone's in sleep.
yeah, so the question was, there's a couple of ways that we've heard about doing location tracking. How do some of them in Collector, some of them in Workforce, how do they compare? If I'm paraphrasing. Basically, Collector supports the notion of location tracking. Location tracking basically allows you to put a breadcrumb of locations where they've been while the app is in the foreground, not in the background. So that is, but it works online and offline. And those will be synced when you go back and you sync your data back. On Workforce, Workforce currently will allow you to track your location and control when you're tracked by setting the status of the worker within the Workforce application, but it does not work offline yet. So I don't know, Jeff, if there's anything you want to say on that.
I'm going to go right to a workforce presentation and talk about all of that and where it's coming next. If you want to follow me to room 20. But our goal there is to support location tracking in the background, do it online, offline, and get that out by Q4.
My only comment is I need the phone off in sleep mode because my clumsy fingers and
Well, even getting a phone call puts your app in the background. So,
Yep.
yeah. I think this lady here had a question I missed there.
You mentioned firewalls, so there is a way to substitute data on our own server?
Yeah, so the question was, you mentioned that there was a way to use our own GS servers that might be within our firewall. And the answer is yes, you can. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that. One is that if you're going to work offline, while you're in the office, you download your map, you go offline, you work offline, you come back in the office, you connect to your Wi-Fi that's on the internal network, and you sync. The other approach, which Jeff, maybe you want to talk about a little bit too, is using VPN. So Jeff mentioned the app level VPN. So that kind of lets you get in through the firewall to access the internal network. And that's another supported flow.
Yeah, and that would be supported by using a mobile device management software. A lot of organizations use Mobile Iron, but there's about 6 or 7 of them out there that you can use, and all of them support app-level VPN. We are going to make some optimizations on that if you're using your own on-premises portal. One of the challenges you have with an on-premise portal and collector is you got to know the URL. You have to type that in to get to your portal. That's a little bit of a burden on your mobile worker. MDMs support this thing called a managed configuration API. So that person that's managing the devices would be able to put that portal URL in and then just get you right to the entering in your username and password. Really streamlines the use of the app. So, yes.
So if I'm offline or if I've prevented my users to do editing of the geography of that feature, number one, and they're doing maintenance and they know it's not really accurately positioned, is there some sort of redlining that can be done through Collector, or can they actually move that, and can I know that they've moved that out in the field? And secondly, my question was about you're supporting QR codes and barcoding, but what about RFID? Because a lot of botanic gardens like mine have RFID to track their collections, and that would be something that would be interesting.
Okay. That's good feedback on the RFID.
Yeah. We'll add that to our list. We'll add the RFID to our backlog. We've talked about it before. We didn't mention it today, but we'll make sure it's there. On the first one, yes, you can control those editing permissions. Now, if you want to enforce that and let them make an observation, what's commonly done there, and the solutions team has an example of this, it's called a map change request, right? So you actually want to use them, and the map change request is a hosted feature layer template as well. In that template, you could say, I've made this observation that the fire hydrant isn't really on this corner. The as-built drawing's wrong. It's over here instead. The change that needs to be made is that it's a location change. And all that schema is managed by just then adding another layer. Now you can get that, and that's really technically markup, if you think about it that way. That comes back, you get notification of that because it's a new feature in that layer. I mean, just simply by that. There's no push notification or anything like that. I'm not trying to say that. And then you can go make those changes in your GIS around it. That would be the workflow that I would recommend for that.
Yeah, and that gives you the ability, they could actually collect the correct location at that point. I mean, the other flows, which I think, aren't as optimal, would be, could use something like that field notes and actually, or Explorer with the markup capability and just sort of truly do a red line. But that's not going to set the accurate location, so you would probably have to send people back out to update it later.